Freedom Radio. As you can see, you know, we landed on some free property over here in an undisclosed location. So the studio production level is definitely increased, but we're definitely going to get into some new segments in this new year of Freedom Radio. One of the segments that we're going to actually get into is something called Conversation and Education. It's going to be a classic review of black movies. And, you know, we really want to like incorporate, you know, art and all levels of art into Freedom Radio programming. And so what we're doing right now is we're going to have a real nice discussion, a review of a classic black movie, one of my favorites actually. Came out of the black exploitation era, the quote-unquote black exploitation era, the 1970s. Films prior to this movie that really set a precedent for filmmaking were films like Sweetback's Badass Song, directed by Melvin Van Peebles, Shaft, directed by Gordon Parks, and those two films were really, you know, they were really pivotal in the whole black film movement. They were released in 1971. A film that came out in 1972, our featured film of the day, is called SuperFly. SuperFly, like I said, is one of my favorites. It was a groundbreaking movie. It was directed by Gordon Parks Jr., and it was produced by Sig Shore and Warner Brothers collectively together. Ron O'Neal, featured Ron O'Neal as the lead character, Priest, brother Carl Lee as his sidekick, Eddie, and it also featured Julius Harris as Scatter. The soundtrack is probably one of the more well-known soundtracks that's ever been produced in black film. Produced by a legendary musician, artist, songwriter, Curtis Mayfield, formerly of Curtis Mayfield and the Impressions. And such songs on the soundtrack of SuperFly was Little Child Running Wild, Pusher Man, Freddie's Dead, and you know, if you really know about this, another song on a real exclusive scene called Give Me Your Love. And so, you know, SuperFly is definitely a classic black movie, and we're gonna have a conversation and education taking place right now through the lens and the scope of this movie SuperFly. I'd like to introduce our panel for today's discussion. To my left, we'll start to my left as we pan forward. Brother DJ Stage One, you know what I'm saying, holding everything down. What's happening, brother?
What's up, brother? How you doing?
All right. And then we have next to DJ Stage One, Brother Kedar. What's happening, brother? How you doing?
What's going on?
All right. And next to Kedar, we have Brother Sonny Day. What's happening, Sonny?
Hey, Ralph, Happy New Year.
All right, man. We driving over here, man. So look, man, you know, SuperFly, man, it opened up a discussion, you know, as we look at the current media today, man, we see that, I mean, it seems like the role of black men in the form of the gangster, the thug. SuperFly really was something that came out that kind of, for me, framed that image of that time perfectly. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it deals a lot with society and how black men are portrayed as gangsters and thugs. You know, SuperFly was, yeah, he had that edge to him, but he was also a real smart dude. You know, he had some dreams, and you know, he had significant relationships with the ladies in his life, and you know, definitely intelligent. So, man, can you speak maybe a little bit, Stage, about your just real quick observations about SuperFly before we get into this clip?
Well, I think SuperFly is had a serious impact on the black community as far as from what I've seen. I was born in '72, so I was able to kind of look later on and see the impact that it had. But I think it increased things through fashion, as far as the flamboyant clothes,
yeah,
and the gangsterism issue that you spoke on. That kind of pushed further. Like when you come from the movies, excited, you know, I kind of want to live fly like that. So I think it had a pros and cons.
Mm-hmm.
It developed a situation where people wanted to be successful, get money, be flamboyant, be happy with who they are, but it also had a lot of negative influences as far as the ramifications of the money, and that kind of went into the jail thing, the crime thing. So I think by the time we're through with this conversation, we'll be able to really weigh that out, because it was just so impactful that it's a devastating movie. There's so many movies like that, but I think this one was one of the creators of that whole long line, you know.
Yeah, that's deep. Thought-provoking observations, brother. Appreciate that. Why don't we go ahead and get into our first clip right now, man, just so we can kind of frame this discussion, man, and how SuperFly came to being on the big screen. So we'll be right back. Freedom Radio, conversation, education, reviews of classic black movies. Stay tuned.
You get the money? I ain't got nothing. She wouldn't give it to me. Told you she wouldn't do it, right? I made the connection. You hear me, nigga? Come on.
Don't care now what nobody say. I gotta take the pain away. It's getting worse a day by day, and all my life it's been this way. Can't reason with the pusher man. Finance is all that he understands. You junkie mama cries, you know, would rip her, but I love her so, love her so now.
Some things go better with Coke. Are you coming back soon, priest?
The introduction of Priest, the main character, the figure of the movie. Also, interestingly enough, as that introduction continues to go, we see a few things. I guess the popular figure of that day, we're talking about 1971, at least within black hairstyles, you know what I'm saying, politically speaking, was the afro. So we see a brother with a long perm, like Brother Sonny said, and also we see an introduction of a brother who happened to be laying down in bed having a conversation, and there was a white woman that was introduced too, next to Priest as the main character. And now, as we see, Priest is driving off in the big hog, you know what I'm saying? That's what they called the cars back then. So, I mean, there's a few things that are going on right now, along with the urban terrain, that are very interesting and kind of switch the pace in the norm of the day, you know what I'm saying? The norm of what people was really on. It's almost like this is a transition politically, this is a transition culturally, this is a transition in a style, even on a style level. So, I mean, any of y'all jump in on what you see on that?
Well, what I'm thinking is that he, first of all, he's a pimp. Mm-hmm. You know, he's portraying a pimp and a drug dealer.
Right.
And it's real funny because he's a pimp and a drug dealer, but when he drives down the streets of New York, he's praised, as opposed to that doctor, that black doctor, that black lawyer driving down the street, you know, because he's being praised. And it's you know, like I said, little kids see this big car, this guy with all the girls, you know, with the white girls, and this big car, and he dressed real nice. I mean, he was sharp, just then, you know, had on a fur coat, jumped in the big old car, you know, and he gets a lot of praise through the neighborhoods. You know, it's almost like a Robin Hood kind of character, you know, with this SuperFly guy.
Yeah.
And I think that that's an exploitation because it had, I mean, you know, visual is something else.
Yeah.
You know, you can see this right here.
Just like right here, my man. Not only he's a drug dealer, he's a person in immaculate style, but he's also a karate expert at this time.
He's a superhero.
Yeah, okay.
You know, he's a superhero. He's in control. You know what I'm saying? And when we talk about, you made mention to, you know, his partner he's laying in the bed with, and the fact that we're also introduced to the fact that he was a drug dealer and he was in control of his white powder and this white woman. So those were all things that were taboo, you know, for black folks. And here's a guy who he's got his perm as opposed to the afro and all that.
It's happening his way.
We also hear some new sounds happening too, as far as the soundtrack is concerned, which, you know, the music definitely plays a role on the visual, the impact of the visual. And, you know, Stage, why don't you speak to maybe like the influence and the impact of Curtis Mayfield on the soundtrack, and maybe even on how the movie set in on the mental at the time, you know?
Well, the composer of the music for the soundtrack for the movie, I think, was very genius because it had a lot of breakdowns and a lot of situations where you can hear and take in the moments. It set the tone very well. But as far as the soundtrack itself, I mean, it's just a timeless soundtrack. It like in '88, I think it was '88, Ice-T came out with Pusha Man, kind of revamped it again. It's just always been a staple in when you look at parodies of that era, they'll play a Curtis Mayfield track as reference to the era and stuff like that. I think it'll always be a staple in like Curtis Mayfield and that soundtrack just always be synonymous with that era. So I think he's done a timeless situation with that soundtrack out of all of his. I mean, he has good music. Besides, that's the album that's really been looked at the most out of all of his discography. But that's because it came with a movie. But he has a lot of other albums that direct towards the Vietnam War, kind of what this album's coming out of. You know, people are coming home. You know, the music was different then. At that time, you could see the change, more of a funk and other things kind of breaking in. So I think that the music represented that change. And like I said, people were coming home from the war. A lot of boundaries were broken in music and just in society and stuff like that. So I think like that he really helped break the barriers into that funk level of the late '70s to early '80s. And
you know, Curtis Mayfield, coming off his influence and impact that he had with Curtis Mayfield and the Impressions, one of the things that they kind of referred to Curtis Mayfield as was another name was the Preacher. You know, I've seen some interviews with Curtis Mayfield because of his, I guess, his ability through his songwriting skills to really speak to the political issues of the day, and even almost like from a real deep spiritual place that was almost grounded in a lot of black church experience. He was able to transcend the church to popular culture as the political movements of the day. Brother Kedar, can you speak to that?
Well, it was the music really played the heart and soul of the movie, because if you listen to the lyrics actually told the story of SuperFly. If you listen to all of them, you know, every character was portrayed in the soundtrack also. And like Stage was saying, is, you know, it told the story of people who were coming home from the war. It told the story of people who had stayed home from the war. It told the story of the street. It was that transition from when we were listening to a lot of jazz and a lot of the blues and those kinds of things, and we started hearing more of soul and funk. So,
yeah.
and that was kind of the style changes as we were seeing also. A lot less buttoned down kind of a thing. And again, that counterculture, we're going to live a little bit freer and be more expressive in our clothes, in our music, and everything else.
Son, what do you kind of remember of?
What, about the music?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's funny because it is timeless. I mean, who knew then that we'd be listening to some dun-dun-dun, and every time you hear it, you think about Curtis Mayfield and SuperFly. You know, when he did the scene, they had a love scene, and give me your love. You know, and everybody's like, oh, that's tight. You know, that's just kind of like the first time that I've ever paid attention to a soundtrack that was really made for the movie, instead of somebody who has a record out and you just put it in there. I mean, because I mean, that came together. That was really nice when it came together. You know.
And I remember hearing an interview with Curtis Mayfield. A lot of the things that he was, from what he said, what he was trying to do with the movie is that he didn't necessarily want to be part of glamorizing, you know what I'm saying, what was happening in the movie with the image of the pimp, with the drug kind of influence that was also happening in the movie. And I think a lot of what he was trying to do as an artist was really trying to balance it out through the music to tell a counter story.
Right, tell the story of us.
Yeah.
You know.
I'm glad that at least in my presentation, I can bring about more status as to white people understanding that we are not, as an entertainers, just people that may just maybe turn flips and holler, shake your shaggy shaggy and do your thing. But we also are people that think, and we also are people who want to progress and have culture and identity as well. Why not sell that in my music?
When we